Hi everyone, welcome, good afternoon. I'm past the post-lunch crash, and I'm glad they put cookies and a lot of sugar out there so we can survive this afternoon, and coffee, my favorite. I see some folks are with Red Bulls, so we're covered. But thank you so much for joining my session. So we're going to talk about supporting new team members beyond the 90 days, right? And this is a very important time in a team member's really life cycle as they join Chick-fil-A. And in the beginning, we have a lot of programs figured out, the 30, 60, 90, and a lot of guidance, a lot of systems that support that. But what happens after that, right? What happens during these crucial stages? How do we make sure that they stay hooked, that they really remain with the organization, that we can make sure that they're a contributing team member and that we don't lose them? So I'm not going to ask you or encourage you to overhaul your operations or however you already function or the things that you're doing, but I'm going to ask you to notice one little gap, and I'll get into that a little bit more, in that most restaurants actually experience. So just notice that, and then I'm going to leave you with a distinction, with a learning framework, and with a conversation and coaching tool that you can take back after today's session. Because, and I said this in my morning session, if you ask anyone who knows me, I'm all about practical stuff. What can I apply when I get back to my desk, when I get back to my restaurants next week? Because what is all of this good for if we can't actually take it back and make it happen in real time, right? So it needs to be tangible, and it needs to be applicable. So, reliable versus ready. What does that mean? I want to make that distinction. Reliable for employees or team members is when they show up, right? They're punctual, they found a way to come to work, they do pretty good work, we have good feedback about them from other team members and guests, but they're pretty consistent, but it stays at that, okay? Not bad. Ready, however, is very different. So that's when you kind of know that someone can succeed at the next level, that they have that additional confidence, that je ne sais quoi that we mentioned this morning, of maybe a hypo, maybe someone who isn't skilled up entirely just yet, but you feel like they're going to be ready no matter what. So they're going to be ready for that next role, and they're not going to need too much support, and they're not going to fail. So our goal today, in terms of what I'm going to show you and what I'm going to encourage you to do, is not to slow down development. I don't want you to take longer than what you need. I know this is a fast-paced industry, right? So it's all about being efficient, but at the same time, caring about people. So I want you to walk away with a good framework that translates that caring, those intentional conversations, but at the same time, making sure that people are ready and that you don't rush into any decisions. Because here's Jordan's story, and this is what happened with her. She got promoted after 60 days on the job. Because Sarah believed in her, she saw that she was punctual, Jordan had a pretty good track record, team members got along well with her, and then 3 months into the job, Jordan quit. And Sarah was super surprised. It was like, what happened, Jordan? I just don't understand. I thought you were ready. I thought you enjoyed yourself here. I thought you were there for this role, in a shift leader's role. And how many of you have that actually had happen? Who here had someone promoted, or did you see, I see a couple of hands, someone getting promoted and they just were struggling with that new role, right? We just felt like they weren't quite there yet. They weren't ready. And it happens all the time. So beyond the 90 days, what really needs to happen is that realization that, is the person ready yet for the additional responsibilities, for the additional potential pressure, right? Or unforeseeable events, or can they function with minimal support in that elevated role? Because if you don't get them ready beforehand and you just throw them in the cold water and you thought they were ready, but they weren't, you're actually failing them. You're failing them as manager, you're failing them as operator, you're failing them as training person, because you are not setting them up for success, and they're getting nervous, they're getting anxious, they're not talking to you about their issues, worst case scenario. So what do people do? They quit, because they feel like they're not up to the job, they're not up to the standards or to the expectations that you had of them, because they didn't want to fail you, right? And we don't want that. Of course we don't. So we want to make sure that we get people ready. So hold on to that example of Jordan. Now, again, back to that question, how many of you had a Jordan? I want you to take a second look at this and think, that person that you have in your mind, whether it was someone on your team or maybe someone in your career, or as you worked somewhere where you saw someone else got promoted and they struggled, what support did they need that they didn't get? What is something that was lacking that you believe should have happened more of? Maybe they didn't get sufficient feedback. Maybe it was confidence. Maybe it was clarity in terms of expectations of the role. Sometimes people quit and said, I wasn't even aware. All this was going to be expected of me, and I just can't do it. I'm sorry, but I can't, right? And that's very important. So I want you to take a minute and reflect on that. And I want you to share that with the people that are sitting near you. So think about how many of you had a Jordan and someone that quit in a role, and what support is it that maybe it's someone right now on your team. What support did they need that they didn't get? I'm going to give you a minute to reflect, and then please share with your peers what your thoughts are on that. All right. I hear there's a lot to say, a lot of support that potentially someone didn't get, and I would love to hear some of your thoughts. So Caitlin will help me here, and I would love to see some hands. Who wants to share with the group? We're coming back. Guys. Okay. We want to hear from you. So who's willing to share a couple of their thoughts? Yeah, I see a hand here. Thank you so much.
Coming your way, my friend.
And please share where you are from and your role.
I'm James. I'm from here in San Antonio. I'm the Executive Director of Operations. I think one of our biggest keys was when we would move someone into a leadership role, we felt bad telling them, hey, you're not doing a good job and we're going to need you to wait a little bit before we continue this promotion. So they get into training and we're going, oh, they're not ready, but we felt bad telling them no. And so I think that's something we've gotten much better at, going, here's the metrics you've got to hit. Oh, you haven't hit them. We're going to go back and we're going to wait, and then we're going to try again later.
Thank you. And it's important that you can say no, but then showing people really concretely, this is what it takes to get you there, and this is how long it's going to potentially take, right? So really having these mile markers, and we're going to see mile marker conversations as well to make that a little bit more tangible. Who else would like to share? Yes.
Hi, my name is Bridget. I'm from Forsyth, Georgia. My husband is the operator spouse, but I also help with a lot of HR and retention. One thing we had an issue was with unmet expectations. So expectations from the team member and from ourselves. Like, we expected them to do things that we weren't clarifying, and they also had expectations that we weren't fulfilling. So we've been working on a program now that helps We kind of have a leadership class before they become a leader to kind of let them know what our expectations are and ask them what they expect from us.
Super important. And there's one thing this morning that I mentioned called paraphrasing. Right there and then in the conversation, when you outline expectations to a team member, make sure they understand it and make them repeat it to you, or if they bring up something to you, paraphrase it back and say, just to make sure I get this right. Is this what you mean by that? And clarity is so important from the get-go, right, when we talk about these things, so we set up people for success. One more person? Yes, please.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Tori from Central Florida. We had discovered, especially into that shift runner role, when we were doing some promotions, there was a lot of that real excitement and rose-colored glasses for those positions that we were lacking some of that one-on-one support and coaching. We were under the assumption, like, perfect, okay, they've gone through all the training, they should be good to go, and then we let them loose. And we were missing that key step on once we launched them into that role, still being there one-on-one supporting and coaching them.
Thank you. And how did you find out that that's what was missing? Sorry.
We found out because we had a newly promoted shift runner. They did the, shadowing shifts with their trainer to be a shift runner, and then 2 weeks after they were done with their shadows, they quit. And their guest experience was really down on their shifts. The team was confused. They lacked clarity. So they definitely felt like they were just dropped into a very stressful situation without the support that they needed.
Yeah, that's a perfect example. Thank you for sharing. And a lot of times, indicators like these, like look at your data, right? Look at a holistic picture. A lot of times data tells us stories. Stay interviews, exit interviews, particularly are important when people share things and then act on them. So this is where you really notice said gaps, and you can hopefully fix them before they become a bigger issue, and you work on retention. So how do we get them ready? And I mentioned that we made the distinction, right, between ready and reliable, big difference. So now we're gonna talk about a learning framework, how that learning really happens for people, and then what are the coaching conversations that you can have with them so that they feel ready when the time comes, and that they are seen and heard and don't get discouraged and demotivated. It's not about adding complexity, but this is one of the most renowned learning frameworks. This really explains how learning happens. And 70% is on-the-job experience, right? This is what happens naturally, organically, by people just coming to work and doing their thing. 10% is what we call formal training, right? This is what you do usually in the beginning, where you have people go through formal safety food handling training, through security, through other things. That's just the typical pattern. Heavy early 10% orientation, then 70% happens on the job. And where's that 20%? That's kind of lacking here, right? And that's called intentional coaching. And there are 2 little boxes missing, but this is intentional coaching. So it determines readiness for people. And these said conversations are just really brief, repeatable coaching conversations that we can have with people. And that's really where the difference lies. So that coaching piece keeps development a lot of times from stalling out. I also want to draw your attention to another super important framework that shows us how learning really happens. So this is interesting, right? Because you see here at the tip, lecture and reading, even audio-visual, only promises a very small retention rate for people. And that's what we do in the beginning, right? We have a lot of manuals that people need to read. Yeah, nowadays we may have switched over to video modules, and they're kind of sitting in the room. Even when we have a couple conversations with them, there's just a smallish retention rate. When does it increase? When we move into demonstrations, discussions, right? And what does that tell us? There's usually a human element. There's the human component that comes in, right? And discussion means dialogue, meaning people can ask questions, they can ask follow-ups, they can clarify, they can say, hey, I didn't get this, can you explain this again for me? But the most important factor and the most important areas where people retain stuff is in practicing by doing and teaching others. So, in terms of how do we make sure people stay, and how do we make sure we get them developed right, is really getting them involved in doing, practicing by doing, and teaching others, showing others. This morning we heard about trusting, right? How do you trust others? Well, you gotta let them. You gotta let them do. You gotta delegate the responsibilities. You have to remove yourself. You have to give them the opportunity to show others what they know. And that's how people really, really start developing that readiness, so that they're ready and they can be moving forward in their development. Here is where we see the biggest gap, and that's what I asked you in the beginning to notice, and this is statistically what we see across industries where the biggest gap lies. The first 90 days go well, but that's when traditional training kind of tapers off. You know, we don't have that structure anymore and we kind of send people on their way, and we believe, hey, they're good, it's gonna work out well. And then that's where we lose them. And that's a huge loss, right? It's a loss financially to us. We've trained them, we've invested in them. We all know too well how difficult it is to find good talent these days. We have to go through the entire process again of hiring, of recruiting, of wasting time and resources and energy. So that's a major gap we need to fill. The 6 to 12 months in the role really determine if we can overcome this gap, job readiness. This is where we can really invest in people and say, hey guys, let's have these conversations, right? Let's have these intentional skills trainings, and they need to continue. We can't just drop off after the 90 days and think, hey, people are ready, they have everything they need. It's such a short period of time. And I've also talked to a few of you over lunch and this morning, and indicators show that when we get people past those initial 3 months or a little bit more, they can actually stay with us potentially for years. Because once they know we invest in them, once they feel ready and cared for, and they trust us, and they can develop this ability for readiness, then we have them with us, and we don't need to rework errors and look again for new staff. Now, this is not going to happen forever, right? This intentional skills training, I just want to mention this, it's not an investment, but that first year, the 6 to 12 months, are definitely crucial to good retention rates and to good development. So onboarding doesn't extend forever, but it's longer than 90 days. Coming back to our 70-20-10 model, the missing piece again is intentional, right? That's where the 20% lie. It's not more modules, it's not more formal training. Coaching sessions should be brief and structured. They're not lectures. They're not you sitting down with someone and saying, hey, this is how you do it, this is when you do it, and this is what you're supposed to do. No, this is not a top-down approach. It's really a discussion. It's meant to be an exchange of information, status quo, ideas, etc. And that's where coaching really happens, asking why. Right? Not only what do you do, how do you do it, why do you belong here, why do you want to work here, finding out a little bit more about people and doing it in a consistent manner. So again, you have to, and I know we're all busy, right? And I said that this morning, we have to schedule stuff. Like our days get away from us, right? And we have very busy things, and this is one of the areas that is most overlooked. And I say this again from working with many different leaders in different industries from an HR and coaching lens, where we don't make time for these small conversations. They don't cost much. I'm not saying they're supposed to take an hour, but really just small check-ins, and they make such a big difference because that's when the 20% coaching comes in. Now, we want to look at the next point, and we're coming back to Jordan, okay? And I want us to think, hey, if we could rewrite the script, right? If we'd had a second chance, let's rewind time and let's give Jordan a second chance. We're Sarah, we're her manager, and we're thinking, if only we had had these conversations with Jordan, if only we could have had her ready, right, when she was, for the opportunity and for the challenge. What is it that we could have done differently? What does intentional development support actually look like for someone? And there is the conversation structure that I'm going to show you in a moment that is very important, where you can follow a certain script and you can familiarize yourself with it. And I always tell people too, it's totally fine to come to meetings or check-ins with a script or with your notes. Right? A lot of people want to make it feel, like they know their stuff, and they want to look like they're responsible and but it's okay. Like, we all need to start somewhere. And if these initial conversations don't feel natural and you need to have your notes in front of you, do that. And then you'll get more used to them as you go. But there also needs to be a specificity on focus. So listen really for that as I show you and go through the conversations. What is it specifically that I can ask for? And that coaching model that I want to start with and really encourage you to use is called GROW. So GROW has been around for quite some time, and it's very popular because it's simple and people remember it because of the letters, obviously. But first of all, what we do in the conversation is asking people, what is it that you want to achieve? Okay? Because sometimes we have a tendency to believe, a lot of us, myself included, that we know what people want. Or it's convenient to us because we're missing a position or we're missing something out here. Well, why don't we plug X into that role? But maybe that's not even what they want or what they're interested in or what motivates them. So it's our job to figure out what people want to achieve and by when. And how strong is their motivation? Maybe in the beginning when you start talking to them, it's not even that strong. Right? And they're not even that interested in something, so they need to grow into it, they need to figure it out, they need to gain more experience, more exposure. But that's the goal. Reality, where are you now? And that's kind of a gap assessment strategy, right? So if someone says, well, yeah, I think I can make trainer in a couple months' time, well, maybe. Maybe they're not quite there yet. So it's a reality check, and it's really kind of trying to figure out with the person together a realistic assessment of where they are. Most of the time, people have a somewhat realistic, but they're kind of overestimating it a bit. They have a tendency to. And sometimes people don't. Sometimes people say I'm miles away when in reality they are not. They just need a little bit of a confidence booster. And that could also be something that makes people quit because they're lacking that belief in themselves when we see it, but they don't just yet. So where are they? Where are you now? And that moment of self-reflection, a lot of people don't take that either. That self-awareness, that pausing and asking them to reflect. And sometimes it's a homework assignment that we have to give them too, right? People don't know just yet. And in the first conversations, you have to say, hey, that's fine, right? If you're not there yet, it's something I want you to think about. Where do you think you are and where do you want to go? And then come back to me next time I check in with you. Options. What options do you have, right? Talking about these pathways for people, these encouragements to see something. And a lot of times, it's also what motivates people. It's seeing others in that exact same role, people like them who have done something to get somewhere, and they're like, whoa, I can see a role model here. I can see someone that, yeah, I could follow their path. That makes sense. And that's actually encouraging. So seeing people like them in similar positions and outlining those different options with them. Maybe it's stuff that they didn't even know about. Maybe you have programs or you have opportunities that you introduced in the beginning of orientation or onboarding, but people forget about them, right? So it's important to remind them and also to encourage them and outline different options that they have. And finally, the way forward. So which choice will you make? And I'm big about commitment and writing stuff down because, again, studies have shown that when you write something down, ideally with pen and paper, I know we all carry our phones and we have our laptops and computers and apps, but the best way to actually commit and pull through with something is when you write it down with a pen and paper. But which choice will you make? So really having people commit to it and holding them accountable to it. So in what time frame, do you commit to doing this, and what specifically can you do? So it goes back to time-bound and specific, and what is the goal that we want to achieve here? Grow. Has anyone heard of this, by the way, before? Raise your hand. Yeah, a couple people. Good. So I want to show you, I talked earlier about some mile markers for conversations, and I want to bring them in here. So this is how you can create a path for development, all right? This is a simple example coming back to Jordan. Remember our team member who in the beginning quit because she was overwhelmed, she couldn't do the role? Well, now we have an opportunity to pick back up with Jordan. Let's pretend it's 3 months ago. We're at month 3, sorry, more. But we're starting at month 4, where we're sitting down with her and we are exploring interest and share behavior expectations. Then we're moving into month 6, where we reinforce progress on behavior number 1 that we outlined with Jordan. It's a behavior that ideally she's on board with, right? We don't want to force anything on her. It needs to be connected to where she wants to go, the goal that she's pursuing, whatever it may be, whatever we figure out with her. I'm not saying that people can come out with stuff out of the blue. Of course, it needs to align as well with our needs and what our restaurant needs and where the match is. But that's behavior number 1. Then month 9, we have another check-in. And I'm not saying those are the only check-ins to have with her. You can have smaller check-ins in between, but these are mile marker conversations, okay? Like the big ones that really are important and that you should definitely conduct. Check progress on behavior 2, set goal for behavior 3. 1, 2, 3. You know, in many, like Steve Jobs in his speeches, a lot of people say always have 3, 1, 2, 3 points, and that's what you can cover. Check progress on behavior 2, set goal for 3, and then in month 12, you confirm readiness across all the behaviors, okay? And you kind of check that off and you have the activity matrix and you see, all right, I think that's it. I think you're ready, or I think you're not, and we have to work on other stuff. But this is a very specific and path for development, and you can set those measurable mile markers. It's important that we take these steps to prevent the Jordan outcome, right? Because readiness is not a mystery. And we've specifically outlined what we can do, and we're not adding any meetings, and we have them. And when we meet with her in the beginning, we also outline this to her, right? We tell her from the get-go, this is what's gonna happen. I'm gonna have little check-ins with you here and there, but these are the official ones, and I'm gonna, so to say, evaluate and check in with you on how it's going. Now, I wanna invite my colleague, Caitlin, on stage here. She's gonna voice Jordan, and I'm gonna be her manager, and we're gonna have these mile marker conversations. So welcome, Jordan.
Hi.
Hey, so we're gonna have our first conversation that is month 4, okay? So Jordan has been with us for a couple of months, and I'm gonna be the coach or her manager, and we're gonna go through the grow model together, all right? Hey, Jordan.
Hi.
How's it going?
It's going really well. I really enjoy teaching people, and
Okay.
I would love to be nominated for the trainer program.
That's great news. That's fantastic to hear. I like that. Well, tell me more about the program. What is it that you enjoy about it, and what do you think? Why do you think it's a good fit for you?
Absolutely. I think that I can really help my teammates, go through the steps and teach them along the way, and I think I'm just ready to do that.
Okay. Do you think there is one area maybe where, what's one area that you can work on, or something that you're not quite there yet for this program?
Sure. I think I can work on my patience a little bit.
Okay.
I've noticed sometimes when I'm helping team members, I tend to get a bit ahead of myself and want them to get it right away, but just slowing down and having that patience and really supporting my colleague.
Good. That's some good self-awareness. Thanks for sharing that. So do you have any idea or any suggestions where specifically you can maybe work on that? Any situations or upcoming things?
Yeah, we actually have a new hire starting next Friday, so maybe I could practice and work with them and help them feel welcomed and onboarded.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Yeah, that's great. So let's check back in a couple weeks, and then we'll see where this goes with that behavior.
I really appreciate
Okay.
it.
Good. So this was the first conversation, month 4, super easy, right? It doesn't even take a long time. It could be just a few minutes of a conversation, but here what we've done is outlined the first behavior, right, that we want to see, patience. So she wants to be part of the trainer program, and we see that this is really something that she needs to work on. She's identified it herself. Sometimes people don't come up with, an area for improvement. They just don't know. They're like, well, I'm not sure. Well, then you need to figure out what are certain traits or competencies that they need, right, for that program. And maybe you know the team member already and you've seen it in the past, and you can encourage them to figure that out and help them along the way. But ideally, if someone can already come up with an area for improvement that they themselves are aware of, that's golden, because then you know you already have their buy-in and that awareness that they can work on it. And then I've also asked her, hey, by when do you think where do you have the opportunity to practice that, right? And she said, well, there's someone new starting, I think I can practice with it. Good, now we're moving on to month 6. Jordan, how's the trainer goal doing?
Yeah, no, it's going really well. I think my confidence is a bit boosted and just excited to continue learning.
Good. Tell me more. Like, has something happened recently with Sam, I think I heard?
Oh, Sam. Yeah, I was helping Sam learn how to use a new machine, and in the moment I didn't really catch on, but when he walked away, I felt he was a little frustrated.
Okay, was that maybe your impatience kicking in again a little bit, what
It's
we talked about last
possible.
time?
Yeah. I mentioned to Sam, that I'm working on it and to be aware of it. And I think, in the moment, maybe I got a little frustrated. And, I want to make sure he knows he's doing a lot so well. And
Yeah.
he's doing a really good job. So maybe I can be better about that.
Yeah, no, that's fine. And, sometimes when we really want to make sure people are doing things right, we give them a bit too much of negative feedback, when in reality, positive feedback is also really important.
Right.
So maybe next time, is that something you could work on with him?
I think so, yeah. I think it's super important that he knows he's doing a great job and he's learning, and that's why I'm here to help him.
Good. So when do you think you can practice giving a little bit more positivity or feedback for him?
I'm definitely going to round with folks on my shift and get some feedback from them and see how I'm doing and check in with him, of course.
Awesome.
After the other day.
Sounds good. So let's keep that in mind, and then we'll check in a couple months again.
Thank you.
So this was month number 6, and here I've kind of tested a little bit the patient's behavior again, and you can dig deeper. This is just an example, of course, right? And then the new one was positive feedback. So what I learned, there was an interaction with Sam, another team member, where there was a bit of impatience and not enough support, right, that Jordan has shown. So I told her, hey, this is something else I need you to work on, right? A little bit more of less of constructive criticism and more of positive feedback. And then she told me, yeah, I can certainly practice that next time come around. Good. Now we're at mile marker 8, month 8. Jordan, are you still interested in that program?
More than ever. I really have been getting into my groove and really would love to support my team in this way.
That's very good. So anything that you can share with me, anything that's been improving or that you've been working on?
Sure. I think I've been much more patient and really sharing that positive feedback, actually leading with that. To ensure that everyone feels supported and heard and appreciated, and then giving that constructive feedback in a positive way too, so they can continue to grow.
So what do you think is missing to get you ready for the formal training program? Is there something that you were able to think of?
Absolutely. I really think I can reach out to my peers, right? Maybe somebody who recently went through the training program and get their feedback on how I've been doing and supporting the team, and, just really get me ready for the next step, hopefully.
I like that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Would you mind actually if I reached out to your peers too, hear a little bit from them about how you interact with them? I just wanted to give you a heads up.
No, I appreciate that, but completely comfortable. We're all a team, and just really grateful, and would really appreciate the opportunity if you were to nominate me for the training program.
Awesome, I will. Thank you,
Thank
Jordan.
you.
Let's give Jordan a hand. I think she's ready for the training program. Okay, so here I closed with Jordan. I tested a couple of the behaviors, and then the last one was the peer feedback, because I want to see how she interacts with others. Whether it's on a shift that I'm not on, I haven't witnessed her, I really want to hear from others, but I gave her a little bit of a heads up. It's almost like a 360 feedback, right? So I don't want her to get scared if she hears from others, hey, your manager has been checking in or has been asking me about you, that's weird. I don't want her to be weirded out, so I kind of gave her a heads up about this, all right? Now, there is one thing I wanna draw your attention to: activity metrics versus behavior metrics. So these mile marker conversations are good, and you can say, all right, did I have my 4 conversations? Check, check, check. Great, I've done my job. I'll stop right here. But what is really important, more so than the number of conversations that you have or when you have them, is whether the shift in behavior has happened. Has there been a tangible improvement or a development of whatever behavior or skill you want to assess, right? Did Jordan's patience improve? Did she improve the things that she sought feedback on with me? I need to write them down. I need to have identified them with her. There needs to be clarity. We need to have agreed on them. And then the last one, if you remember, was did you give positive reinforcement to others? So I really tried to assess that with her through my conversations. And these are short examples, right? Your conversations can be much longer. And they shouldn't feel, you can really mold them into what your personal style is, right? You all have your unique ways of communicating with people. You know your team members better than anyone else. So make sure, because communication is two things. It's what you say, so that's the activity metrics, and the mile markers, but also how you say it. So make sure you adapt your message to the person who sits in front of you, okay? Because we all have our different lenses for communication and for receiving and hearing information. So make sure you adapt that a little bit as you get to know your team members. And I recognize after 3 months, we don't know a person that well, but we probably got an idea of the type of personality that they carry. So I encourage you to do that too, because that goes a long way. We cannot have that cookie cutter, same message or same script for every single person. We are all wired differently. So I always tell people that a little preparation in terms of molding your message in the right way goes very far, right? So keep that in mind. Now, I want to put it back on you a little exercise to close here today. Think back to that person who is on a development path. It could be someone that you're currently working with on something. It could be 2 people or more, or someone that you've identified already, where you're like, I think they're gonna be ready for that conversation in a couple of weeks or in a couple of months' time. And what is their next mile marker? Are you already at the 4-month mark? Are you a little further out? Are you at the 6-month mark? Or do you want to prepare maybe a template to incorporate these conversations broader? And how would you measure that behavior? So think about also behaviors, right? For Jordan, we had patience, we had peer feedback, we had positive reinforcement. So these were the behaviors that I was looking in her to accomplish. So think about these for a little bit. And then I want you to share with a peer as well, or someone who sits near you, who you think of and what those mile markers are, and maybe a couple behaviors you already have identified.